Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Better Not Perfect podcast, Season 2. I'm your host, Dr. Shea Butler, the author of Better Not Perfect From Hot Mess to Life Success, a woman's guide to learning, loving, and being herself unapologetically. And if you've joined me in season 1, we've spent some time getting to know one another. I've been telling you about the book, telling you about my life, and we've just enjoyed just great dialogue. Now, here in season 2, I've been bringing to you remarkable women who have been on part of my better journey and who have just really encouraged, inspired, just been uplifting for me. And I knew that in bringing them to you, they would have something to share that would resonate with you, encourage, and inspire you as well. So, in studio today, we have a special guest, Deborah Collins. And Deborah is a retired Wall Street attorney. She's a retired and Deborah is a retired attorney with a Wall Street and a government background. Deborah, we are so pleased that you have joined us today. Welcome.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, so I'm going to begin with you the way that I begin with my other guests and ask you to talk to me about when you hear the words better, not perfect. What does that mean to you in a personal way?
Well, in a personal way, it means a lifelong journey to discovery of self. And I feel that continuous learning is an absolute in my life. Well, they say the only absolute is that there are no absolutes, but that's an absolute for me to continue to strive, to grow, to become a better version of who I currently am.
Hmm, that's powerful. So, on this journey to better, in the book, I talk about in chapter 1, I begin off saying what a hot mess I was at 28 and a half. And, I, in the book, certainly in a better space, but it was a journey along the way. And, I've invited you because one of the things that you have always been to me is a mentor, certainly professionally, in a myriad of ways. But I've so admired the way that you've spoken into my life and helped and encouraged me along my career paths. And I know you have mentored others as well. And, as part of the better journey and growing into ourselves and growing into self awareness and ultimately self love and then authenticity and showing up unapologetically, means overcoming issues that relates to perfectionism and imposter syndrome. And I'm wondering, have you in your life or career ever felt any of those emotions or experienced any of those
Uh,
feelings?
Let me count the ways. I have on many occasions. I became an attorney at the age of 33. In fact, I recall when I decided to go back to law school, what a difficult decision that was for me to make. But there were no role models for me to follow. There was no one in my attorney in my neighborhood or in my family who would ever practice law. This was quite a new venture for me, and I wasn't certain that I could accomplish it. I wasn't certain that I'd ever get there. Um, I have to tell you that even though I was able to take the bar, do fairly well after taking it twice, by the way, I took it twice so that I could do even better. I studied for it the second time. When I actually became an attorney, there were struggles that I could not have anticipated. But even before that point, in law school, I decided that I was going to continue to teach. I was teaching at the time at the college level, teaching Spanish. I was going to continue to teach just in case I didn't pass the bar. I was just so incredibly nervous about the notion of having to step out into this world, which was completely foreign to me. So, talk about self doubt. I had plenty of it, so much so that I worked my first year while in law school, teaching at night and studying during the day. Not a good formula for success in law school,
They don't
not
even
at all.
allow that now in law school. They tell you you
And
can't.
it's a good thing because I failed constitutional law, which stunned me. I was not a person accustomed to failing. I failed 2 classes and was devastated, devastated, and knew that this was going to impact my career going forward. Oh, so I thought. I mean, I wasn't on law review. I didn't do any of those things. But I decided, okay, if this is going to work, I've got to get through it. I've got to buckle down, really apply myself, and figure out how to turn things around. It didn't help that I was going through a divorce at the time. And I had moved from Westchester County to Brooklyn, moved in with my gay male friend from fifth grade and just what talk about a mess. My life was a mess in my first year of law school. And I even now, when I think about it, I just feel like, how on earth did I ever get through that? So, I mean, this is probably a long winded answer to your question, but the self doubt started back then because there wasn't anyone I could turn to say, well, how do you get through that? I mean, the first year of law school is the toughest and anyone who's gone through the process will let you know that it is truly like boot camp. And if you can't get through that first year, and many did not, you can forget about the law school experience in its entirety. So it started back then.
Wow. Oh, I never knew that. And
No,
I share something in common with you. I'm failed academically at a point in my life. I failed more than a class, though. I actually failed out of college. And, now when I talk to audiences, I can say with a lot of confidence that how many of you know that failing at something doesn't make you a failure? But
yes,
at
sir.
the time when I was living it, I felt like a complete and utter failure.
Yeah.
So I had to dig deep and find tenacity and courage and things that I didn't know that I had, um, and really go back at it again. But I had to change certain things when I went back at it again. I had to change geographically, I had to change attitudinally, I had to change a lot of things. So, do you have experiences in your life when you had to dig deep and find tenacity and do something that you maybe initially didn't do well and had to regroup and do again, or maybe it was a challenge that was put before you, something you'd never done before, and had to find courage to do it?
Oh, sure. Even before law school, I had to make the decision to accept the fellowship for graduate study in Spain. Remember, I was a Spanish major, and I was terrified. I'd never left the country. My whole life was NYU at that point, but I'd not left the country. And I thought, oh my God, what is going to happen to me if I leave home? I, I, I don't know. And I remember my best friend at the time saying to me, Debbie, you're going to change. You're not going to come back the same person. Of course I am. I know what do you mean I'm going to change. She says, oh no, you can't have that experience and come back the same way you left. And she was absolutely right. But it was terrifying, terrifying to be away from my family, terrifying to be away from my friends, from my culture, my country. Those first few weeks, I was so lonely and so afraid. And while I knew Spanish, I didn't know the culture. And I remember sitting in a park in Madrid and waiting for tourists to come by so I could eavesdrop on their speaking, um, but their conversations in English just because I was so lonely. And at that time, I thought, what am I going to do? I can't go back home. I don't have the money to go back home. This is it. They gave me a fellowship for graduate study. I have just a little bit of money. My parents can't afford to send me anymore. This is it. It's make it or I don't know, or bust. And on top of all of this, my mother was sending me letters saying, Veronica just got married and she had 7 bridesmaids. And oh, and she's married such a great guy. And there you are. And people saying to me, well, what is Debbie doing? And I have to say, girl, she's in Spain. And she said it as though she were ashamed. So that's a good thing. I don't know. There you are. Nobody even knows where this Madrid place is, and there you are in Spain. Everybody else's daughter's having big weddings and having babies, and you're in Spain. Mom, I'm getting a master's degree. Oh, that's too much. You don't need another degree. That's ridiculous. So
Wow.
I had to.
Okay, so then it wasn't just me who felt that, okay, coming up on this for me it was the age of 30, my culture, my family, my community, by the age of 30, if you weren't married or close to it, you were
Oh,
getting these inquiring looks like, what's wrong with her? Why is nobody
yeah,
choosing her?
yeah.
So you
But wait,
had
I was only 23, and my mother was freaking out because I wasn't engaged at 23. So, girl, please, you have a degree. Come home. What is wrong with you? But for my father saying, leave her alone. She is following her destiny. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And so now we have a generation of young women who are looking to also establish themselves in a career or pursue an advanced degree. And they're putting off relationships and marriage and some are, freezing eggs and doing other things because they're saying, oh, it's my time now. It's
Yeah,
my time now. And so there's this notion of I want my independence. Um, but then there's that wake up moment somewhere around 29, 31, 32, when or maybe even 35 when they're saying, I think it's time for love in my life. And sometimes love is hard to find, when you're ready.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, this is so interesting. I literally had this conversation not more than an hour ago with some women who are, I teach Spanish online, and it was conversation completely in Spanish. And one of the young women who just got her doctorate is 33 years old, bought a house, is doing very, very well by anybody's standards, is saying, I look around me and all of my friends are married. I'm not. I don't even have a boyfriend. I don't know what to do. I just feel like I haven't accomplished everything I set out to accomplish in my life. And you're 33. You have a doctorate. You have your own home. When it's your time, I said, cuando le toca a ti, when it's your turn, it will happen. It will happen for you. But this one, we spent the better part of 45 minutes talking about how sorry she was that she could not say that she not only wasn't engaged and isn't engaged, but doesn't have a boyfriend. Oh my God, I can't believe here we are in 2023, and this young woman feels like she has to apologize for being successful, but not having a man in her life.
Yeah,
Wow.
and I relate to her, and hopefully she'll manage it better than I did because I just imploded, and and finally, I had my good friend had to have an intervention with me and say, you're crazy. What are you doing? You're acting out. You're desperate, and I
Mm,
was. I literally and was about. I wanted to be married so bad. I am quite sure that I would have made the wrong choice. I would have, if someone would have come to me at that moment who I would have known in my heart of hearts was not the person for me. Um, I was at that place where I probably would have said yes, or so I think. Fast forward a few years later, when I moved beyond that place of desperation, and I tell the story in the book of what sort of got me there was one that intervention sort of shook me when he held a mirror up and said, look at how you're acting, look at how you're behaving. And I was ashamed, you know I cursed him out, but I was ashamed. and
mm,
and but it really did. It was a wake up moment. And it made me say, okay, if I'm going to live the rest of my life with this person, me, maybe I need to get to know her. Maybe I might want to like her, eventually love her. And then maybe I can show up authentically and really be her instead of being Sybil, that throwback movie, the woman with
Absolutely.
multiple personalities, because I'm trying to fit into so many different places and please so many different people with the hopes that a dude will come along and will pick me, and and then that journey began, and after being on that journey to learn myself, love myself so that I could be myself. Somewhere around the age of 31, 32, when I look back and realize I didn't turn into a pillar of salt because I wasn't married when 30 came and went. Um, Lo and behold, love came. And, I say in the book, love didn't come when I was perfect. Love came when I was better.
Mm,
And I was better in a place where I was more open to receive it, and all of that negative energy that I had been emitting out into the universe um, was exchanged for, to the point that I could date and say to people with confidence, well, this is where I'm at in life. This is what I'm, and I want someone who is sort of at that place and interested in those same things, a committed relationship. And I find that a lot of women nowadays are afraid to be so open and say,
yes.
I'm looking for a committed relationship for fear of running the person away.
Mhm. I agree with that, but a resounding theme this evening with the two women with whom I had the conversation was, have you really thought about what you need and not as much about what you want out of a relationship? And I'm not talking about non negotiables, but have you been truthful with yourself around what it is you need to feel fulfilled in a loving relationship? And that takes a lot of, I think, self examination. It takes a lot of very painful introspection, very painful introspection, because it does harken back to what we did not have, or I believe what you either did not have in your childhood or what you continue to seek, whether you acknowledge it or not. You may not want to share it, but we're all on a journey, not just of self discovery, but seeking whatever was missing in our childhoods.
Mm. And that's a good point. What you need versus what you want. I mean, I remember I had a girlfriend who would always say, he has to be 6'4". If he's not 6'4", I won't even.
Yes,
And and
I think I
so
know her.
we evolve out of that, place in life where we just focus on the external trappings of beauty, and we learn that it really needs to be more about attraction, right? Than
Exactly.
an exactness about height or weight or any of those other things or build,
Mhm,
and and
mhm.
and and become something where we're looking for more substantive things. We start
Yeah,
thinking about humor and the importance of laughter and the importance of finding an intellectual mate, or someone we share similar interests with, and
exactly.
those things take on more significance. You know.
Yes, they do. In fact, years ago, I remember a gentleman saying to me that he wanted to find someone with similar reference points. And you know what? The more I thought about it, the more it really resonated with me. Someone with similar reference points is going to get you. I mean, I find that, I've certainly had uh, several relationships, as you know, I've been married a few times. So I'm not waiting for a proposal, but I have been waiting for the person who gets me and with whom I have similar reference points. And, I think I found them. I think it's important to know what those reference points are in your life and whether they loom large or they're just kind of your affect.
Hmm.
Your affect. Does he have to be a member of a fraternity? Not so much. Does he have, for me, does he have to love art? That would be nice. And maybe science fiction. And by the way, I don't really confess that to a lot of people, but I want the person to whom I confess that I like science fiction who won't say, "Boy, are you a weirdo." you know, someone with whom you feel comfortable enough to confess these little quirks and idiosyncrasies that set you apart from other people and make you maybe not so cool in certain circles.
Right. And even if they don't necessarily bring them, maybe they're a person who's open to saying, well, let
Yes,
me explore science fiction. Let me see, what you love about it and be willing
absolutely.
to at least expand their horizons and see if it's something that they could be interested in.
Yes,
While we
yes,
also do the same.
exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to this notion of career. You mentioned this person that you've spoken to who really has finished in the highest degree. She's earned a doctorate. I've been talking to a lot of my mentees and a lot of women who struggled with things similar to what I've struggled with this notion of perfectionism and imposter syndrome and how that shows up in the workplace. So I
Mhm.
know you mentor professionals, and I know you have a heart for young professionals starting out their careers and launching their careers. And what advice would you give to someone who is maybe they're new, and then I'm going to ask you to talk and shift and change hats and talk to that more experienced audience. But for the new person, the new college graduate, or the new person starting out a new trade, and they're just beginning their journey in the world of work, what are some of the tips you think that they need to know, especially maybe if they feel that they may not fit or belong there?
Oh, this is so interesting. Actually, years ago when I was on Wall Street, I created this document called Debbie's Tips of Survival in Corporate America, 10 steps. And I would take young associates up to a private dining room. They were all people of color. And I'd say, look, this is what you need to do in order to be successful in this environment. And one of the main tips I give to people, whether they're in a Wall Street environment or corporate or not, is yeah, you have your own quirks, etc., but you can be as eclectic as you are competent. And
Hmm.
if people will overlook your quirks, if you know your subject matter, you have a strong skill set, and you are able to think on your feet, good judge, there's no substitute for good judgment.
Hmm.
I tell that to young people all the time. I don't care where you are, which field of endeavor. At the end of the day, common sense and good judgment will rule the day. You can know your subject matter backwards and forward, but if you can't apply it to a real life situation so that you become a problem solver whose insights and guidance people seek, you will not be successful. I
Hmm.
believe that I've been successful not because I have a law degree or I speak another language. Those are nice things, but I'm practical. I'm a problem solver. And I don't, when I have something to say, I don't mince words. Now, I've had to learn how to become diplomatic. And so I say that a lot, particularly to people of color who, like me, grew up in certain settings and certain um, places where it's important to be able to not only say what you have on your mind, but to say it in a word that in a way that's compelling and will make people step back if they need to. But I say to them, that's not a skill set that you can use if you're trying to get ahead. Use the common sense, use the good judgment, and the ability to think on your feet. And these are skills that you already have. Hone these skills as you go forward. This is what I say to young professionals entering a field for the first time.
And that's such great advice. And one of the things that I think I had to learn, because I didn't have a problem, especially when you're young. First of all, if diplomacy is not your natural go-to, and you just uh, are strong opinioned, that sometimes in environments I've had to have to learn to tone it down. And as I matured, to your point, diplomacy came. But one of the things that I know, I had a mentor who would say to me, before you speak in a meeting, Shay, I need you to ask yourself three questions. And she would say, ask yourself, does it need to be said?
Mhm.
It's number one. the answer is yes, then you say, does it need to be said now? Is the second question. And then her last question, does it need to be said by me? And that has saved me. I mean, I wish I'd met this mentor before 35 because it would have saved me a lot more trouble in my
Good
early
guidance.
years. But
Absolutely.
when you have a generation of people who um, want to show up authentically and unapologetically, I sometimes have to explain to audiences what that means. Showing up authentically and unapologetically does not mean that you say what you want, when you want it, the way you want it, because you have to keep it real.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm,
Oh, yes.
mm,
Our young folks need to hear this over and over again. I've had many situations. Unfortunately, I had to learn through experience and to getting laid off or, told to step back or receiving a performance review that really stung. I had to learn that way.
mm.
So now I've incorporated these well, it's tactics into speeches that I give, into workshops that I conduct, so that people will understand that you don't have to make the same mistakes. And if you're going to make that mistake, don't make it twice.
Mm. So, for those of us who may be more seasoned in our careers, one of the things you brought up was the importance of, I would paraphrase, a strong EQ. To have emotional
Absolutely.
intelligence, and that's advice you would give to people starting out. I've found that there have been some people who are advanced far into their work life and haven't quite developed that skill. And not everyone has it. I mean, there's a range of neurodiversity and other things that may be preventative. Do you have any thoughts on how to help people develop that? Or one of the things I would say, if there is any skill that I'm deficient at, I would try to surround myself with people who had those competencies and 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 not totally rely on them, but they would help me along with things that I like. I'm not naturally a quant person, so I would try to surround myself with junior executives. When I would go hiring, I wasn't looking for mini me exactly, but I would try to find individuals who sort of complemented my skill set. Have you seen that, or any advice for someone?
I Yeah, I absolutely have. And what I say to people, more often than not, is know your strengths. And not only know your strengths, but be able to articulate your strengths. If someone asks you, I mean, I've had people say to me, experienced professionals will say to me, listen, I can do it all. No, you can't. Nobody can do it all. I can multitask. No, not successfully. No, you can't. You think you're multitasking, but you're not. You're not. Something is being left undone. And so I say a couple of things. One, understand the importance of timeliness. When you receive an assignment, I don't care at what level, when you receive an assignment, your first question should be, is this time sensitive? Because you need to know how to prioritize. And when we acquire a skill set and when we're very or more senior in our roles, we think, well, I'm just going to put that on my list to do and I'll get around to it. But wait a minute. If you're in a fast paced environment and there are time sensitive issues, you need to understand the priority of getting things done when those things have been requested of you. Or maybe they're not a priority, but you need to understand that before you walk away and start working on it. And then understand the assignment. Don't walk out of a meeting without being able to. And if you have to, repeat what you've heard. So let me understand this. The goal is at the end of the day, we need to accomplish X, Y, Z. What is the objective? Maybe your role is a small part in a larger endeavor. You need to understand that. But what is the objective? Understand the vision. And something I didn't understand when I first entered corporate America was know the culture. You
Mm,
better learn the culture fast. Forget about reading. When you Google a company, find out what people are saying on vault.com. These are the people who have worked for that company and they can give you the real deal about the culture and what it takes to succeed. You have to understand the culture and know whether or not you can succeed within it. I have a mentor who's an extremely successful woman. I'm not going to mention her name. You know who she is. Very high ranking executive who, even to this day, will call me for guidance. And she recently was very highly placed in a company. And she realized in fairly short order, wait a minute, I don't know this culture. This is a fabulous company with a great profile, but I don't know this culture. I can't be successful here. I don't speak the language. I don't understand the idiom. I don't It's going to take me months, months at minimum to understand the jargon so that I can speak intelligently. Yes, I bring a particular skill set, but the application to that skill set in this particular culture is going to be completely different. So I need to move. And she left and went
Mm,
elsewhere. Smart. You have to know when to fold them, know when
right.
to leave. It may sound like a great job, a great opportunity, look great on your resume, but if you don't understand that culture and you can't get it and get it quickly, get out.
I love that. And it gets to the notion of self-awareness. And part of self-awareness is learning and clarifying our own values. And because when you think about culture, you one of the questions you want to ask is, do this does this organization's values align with my values?
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's best to ask and answer that question if you can before a job, before you say yes. But if you find out afterward, you have to then start negotiating with yourself and saying, okay, you know, is there some are there aspects that I can live with? Or are we just too different? And it's almost akin to relationships or friendships. Are we just so different that that this is not really going to work? Or are we different, but this is a growth moment for me? You know, is this are these values maybe not something that were in my top 5, but I'm willing to try to learn, if these are things I can be on board with. And I think if it doesn't compromise your integrity and you want to give it a try, I would encourage people, give it a try. But at the end of the day, it's really important that you know yourself, know your values. Like you said, study the organization and then find out if you can fit there. And if you
Exactly.
can't, hightail it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I tell people, keep your ear to the ground. I just had this conversation yesterday with somebody very highly placed who's looking at a board opportunity. They're looking at this person too. And I said, Let me just put a couple of questions to you. One, why you? Why now? Let me suggest that you examine the org chart. And when you do so, figure out whether or not there's a DEI person, how important DEI is to this corporation, who sits on the board, and is there pending employment litigation? Now, that may
Mm.
not be a matter of public record, but you better put it to them because oftentimes when people look like us and we're brought in a highly placed position, it's because there's pending litigation. I'm just being real here. I mean, I
Oh,
was an employment
wow.
lawyer for many years. There's pending litigation, and they need somebody who looks like me. During
Wow.
discovery, they want to be able to say, oh, we have X number of females or African Americans or Latinos on the board. And hey, look at our board. Look at the composition. Well, that's all well and good. And that may still be a great first place for you to go so that you can later on move to a board that is more, to your point, Shay, aligned with your values. But when you reach a certain point in your career, and I'm talking about highly placed or senior executives, C suite people, you have a reputation too. And you can't afford the reputational risk of aligning yourself with an organization that has a disparate way of conducting itself, particularly in ways that may impact our communities negatively. And this person I'm speaking about actually has a presence in our communities and in our community and is known as a warrior and a fighter for the rights of others. So if this is important to you, make sure that where you're going is not going to impact your ability to be effective in ways that are important to you within your community because you can afford to say no. You can afford to say no. Not
Wow.
everybody can, but when you reach a certain level in your career, you can turn stuff down and
Mm.
walk away with knowing that you have done the right thing because just as they wanted you, someone else will too because you've got a fabulous resume. I remember when I went to the position from which I retired, and I was interviewing. I said to the senior person, the equivalent of a CEO, "Have you seen my resume?" And I know that was arrogant, but I didn't want the job. Have you seen my resume? I don't do window dressing. And actually, it endeared that person to me. He was very impressive. I don't do window dressing. If you want me, I need a budget. I need to report directly to you. I need to be there to be a dotted line report to the heads of the other departments because they need to know that you mean business about this initiative. And if you don't, it's okay. No hard feelings. I
I love
respect what
that.
you're attempting to do, but you have to be able to walk away. And when you walk away, you know that my finances are in order, my will is in order. I'm good. I'm
Mm,
good. I may not
mm,
be a billionaire, but I'm okay. This is a job. This is not my career.
mm,
It's a job.
mm, mm,
Know the difference.
mm. I love that. I love that. So we talked about early failures in life. We've talked about the heights of education and finding courage to do those things that we weren't sure we could do, and we talked about relationships, and we talked about, advice for young professionals, advice for more seasoned executives. And you never disappoint. You always bring wisdom, and you always bring new insights. And I thank you so much for joining me today and
You.
sharing your pearls with the world. And we are made all the better for it.
And I thank you for boldly stepping out, boldly walking in your purpose, your courageous way of living and being is changing lives. So
Mm.
continue to do what you do, and you make me proud every single day. Yeah, 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 it's true. You make me proud every day. I'm so proud of you, Dr. Shale Butler.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
having me.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
inviting me this
Thank you.
evening.
Well, okay, before I cry, to the podcast audience, Better Not Perfect. If you've joined us in season one, then I encourage you to continue to enjoy us in season two. You can catch more episodes on YouTube at better.notperfect. You can catch us on Apple Podcasts and across a myriad of other platforms. You can go to my website and find out what those platforms are and where to find them at www.drshaybutler.com. That's www.drshaibutler.com. Until the next time, continue to strive toward better and have a great rest of the week. See you back next week. Bye bye.